Welcome back. Some of you have probably been in some other webinars of ours today. We're doing a full day. This is session number 5, if I haven't lost track, 5 of 6. So let me go ahead and share my screen and we will get started. Happy Day of Equity. Happy Digital Inclusion Week. I hope it's going well for you all. I'm sure it's busy for many of you. Lots of events happening around the country in digital inclusion, which is always exciting to see. So we really appreciate you being here with us. The topic today in this session is digital equity planning, and we'll hear from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. Just a quick administrative note before we get started. We're hoping to have time for Q&A at the end. So please, throughout the session, if you have comments or questions, please go ahead and send them in a chat to our co-host, Mohammed, and he will take a look at those at the end to share with Annika. And with that being said, I will pass it to our founding executive director, Cami Griffiths, to introduce our guest speaker.
Thanks, Josie, for setting us up and for taking care of moving the slides forward and keeping everything moving. I'm Cami Griffiths, the founding executive director of Digital Lift, and I'm just really excited to see Annika again. We met each other a few weeks ago in Kansas City at the Digital Access Research Forum that was held by the Federal Reserve Banks. And we were lucky enough to be chosen to speak together on the same panel. So I've gotten to hear some of the things she has to say, and I'm excited to hear more. Annika is an urban planner dedicated to community and economic development. Her planning interests lie in using mixed methods research to address issues of equity in housing, climate planning, and digital equity. So with that, Annika, I hand it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Cami, and thank you, Josie, for starting off this wonderful session. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today. I am very excited to be here at Digital Lift's Day of Equity and to share some of the work that we've been doing around digital equity planning. So I work as a digital equity planner at MAPC, or the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, which is Boston area's regional planning agency. Here we partner with municipalities to embed digital equity into local planning efforts. What that means is that we help cities and towns think about internet access, digital skills, and device availability as essential parts of community well-being, just like planners and folks at your city or town hall are thinking about housing, transportation, or public health. So today, in my presentation, I will give you all a glimpse into how we approach this work, specifically how we combine more quantitative data assessment with community engagement to understand the unique barriers and opportunities that come up in communities. I'll also share some examples from local projects and a few policy and program ideas that have emerged from the few plans that we have done so far. So as I talk about this work, we can move to the next slide, where I want to give you all a sense of the region that we serve. So MAPC region, like I mentioned, is Boston Region's, the regional planning agency. And this includes 101 cities and towns that are kind of organized into 8 subregions that you can see in the map here to your left. And together we serve about 3.4 million residents. It is a region with a lot of diversity, and by that I mean there are a lot of small coastal towns to gateway cities and even dense urban neighborhoods, each with different infrastructure, resources, and digital access challenges. These differences really shape how we think about equitable planning as planners serving our region. And what works for one community might not work for another. So our approaches are kind of geared to be more flexible, more place-based, and grounded in the local realities and resident stories that we hear through our process. And this regional diversity is what makes MAPCs or our role unique as well, because many a times we act as connectors across municipalities, and that means helping communities learn from each other, set up communities of practice, and help them develop more shared goals to achieve strategies or actions when resources may not be equally distributed, or when there is a lack of resources and there's more partnership required. With that context in mind, I can share a bit more about who we are as an agency and the kind of work we do. Next slide, please. So MAPC's mission is to promote sustainable development, smart growth, and regional collaboration across Greater Boston area. And we work across a wide range of areas as planners, city planners, town planners, and it spans across arts and culture, clean energy, transportation, community engagement, and data analytics, and more traditional planning fields as well, such as land use planning, economic development planning, environment planning, and housing planning. Each of these areas connect back to our broader goal of helping communities become more livable, equitable, and resilient in the Boston area. So with that context in mind, I would say digital equity is one of the newer areas of practice within this framework, and it kind of sits at the intersection of many of these issues, and more specifically, my position sits at the intersection of traditional planning, traditional land use planning, more research, and more municipal services. So we are constantly hearing about different aspects of needs from people, whether it's access to telehealth in our public health work, broadband infrastructure in housing, or workforce development through digital skills. So when we talk about digital equity, we are not just thinking about it as a standalone effort, and we are pushing ourselves many a times to think more deeply and how it is connected to how we think about planning for more thriving and connected communities in intersection with housing or climate or economic development. And that's what I'll be diving into next, what digital equity planning looks like in practice and how we approach it at MAPC as a regional planning agency. Next slide, please. So now that we have talked about MAPC and how digital equity fits into our broader planning work, let's look at what a digital equity plan actually is. At its very core, we think of digital equity plan as a roadmap for inclusion. It helps communities understand where gaps exist and what actions can help bridge them. It typically has three main parts. The first being developing a vision. This is where we work with residents, local partners, and the municipalities to define what digital inclusion means for their specific community. So it is grounded in lived experiences, how people access and use the internet in their daily lives, and what barriers stand in their way of accessing anything digital, anything technology related. Second is the assessment area, which involves identifying the existing conditions and also looking at community needs and aspirations. So here is where we look at both data and what we hear from the community. And in our previous plans so far, we have heard things like affordability, device access issues, infrastructure gaps, or digital literacy needs that come up in these assessment phase. This helps us understand the landscape of both challenges and opportunities, and it looks different for different municipalities depending on what their unique priorities are, what is the character of that municipality. And finally is the action plan. This is where everything kind of comes together in the end. It outlines concrete projects, concrete resources, and strategies to move from insights, findings to more implementation. So this could include initiatives like device distribution programs, public space Wi-Fi pilots, training opportunities, or more policy recommendations for long-term change. So at MAPC, we look at digital equity as both like a framework and a process, because it is a process of creating systems and partnerships as we develop this plan document, or whether it's online or offline, that makes digital access a sustained part of community development and not just one-time intervention. And something unique that I have learned by doing multiple digital equity plans is also that the nature or the character of each digital equity plan changes also with who we are working in the city hall. For example, when we are working with fellow city planners or fellow like community development planners, they are thinking a lot more about incorporating internet access or digital access into their housing production plans or in their open space recreational plans. When we are working with an IT director at a city hall, they are a lot more focused on infrastructure investment and making sure broadband is an accessible utility or amenity for a lot of the residents, and more targeted access goes to people who really need the most. And sometimes we've also worked with DEI directors in the city hall. And in those cases, we have really prioritized inclusion, or like we have led with inclusion as our North Star, and trying to bring in voices of people who don't speak English as their first language, who are immigrants, who are older residents, who are living with disabilities, and how can those voices, how can their insights be kind of codified into different planning policies and actions that we develop. With that, I can move to the next slide, where here I will touch about what digital equity planning at MAPC looks like, what specifically, what is our approach to digital equity planning. So we have three central approaches to undertaking the process itself. First being that it is data informed and community led. So we combine more quantitative data analysis with lived experiences in this phase. And in terms of quantitative data, we typically look at US Census data, specifically the Americans Community Survey, the ACS data, to understand the demographic patterns. They also have, ACS also has metrics on percentage of households without internet access, percentage of households who rely only on smartphones, or percentage of households without any devices. We also look at FCC data to understand the distribution of internet service providers in a community. So with that, we also go into the community to hear directly from residents. And some of the methods that we've used for that is workshops, focus group discussions, interviews, and surveys. This helps us ground the planning process comprehensively in both numbers and narratives of resident stories that we hear from ground up. Second is planning for our second approach, our central core principle of our approach is planning for action. We want these planning documents to move beyond just vision statements and to lead to more real and tangible outcomes. So our goal is for is not for these plans to sit on someone's shelf at the city hall, but something that can trigger more funding, more strategic programmatic interventions into a community. And with that in mind, each plan includes short-term, long-term strategies, things like multilingual digital literacy programs or regional partnerships for device distributions. We essentially see these as building blocks for more systemic change and trying to get the ground running for municipalities to take the plan forward. And lastly, as a regional planning agency, our last core principle is that we are a public agency. Our work is multidisciplinary and collaborative across multiple municipalities in a region. So we all know digital equity is not just a tech issue. It intersects with many different aspects of people's everyday lives, whether it's housing, transportation, climate resilience, or public health. And our goal is always to bring together local governments, housing authorities, schools, libraries, community organizations to think more collaboratively and regionally. So in short, our digital equity planning process is about connecting the dots and grounding the work in the community realities by building more actionable roadmaps in a way that we're building the capacity of municipalities that we are working with through the process. Next slide, please. So before I dive deeper into our different phases of our planning process, I want to highlight 4 key principles of community engagement that our community engagement department at MAPC supports us in doing, that guides our work and keeps resident stories at the center of what we do. So first is meeting people where they are. This means engaging with residents in ways that are convenient and comfortable for them. And whether it's visiting them at community centers or holding meetings in their neighborhoods at times that works for them. So sometimes it's evening meetings, night meetings. Just yesterday, I was at a farmer's market trying to talk to people. So piggybacking on community events that are already happening and in a way that builds or is more embedded into the community fabric. And the goal here is to reduce the barriers and make participation realistic for everyone. Because if there's one thing that we've learned from our process, it is very clear that people do want to share their needs, do want to share their insights. They have ideas that they want to share, but it is not everyone has the capacity to come to you, to go to the city hall or town hall to talk about it. So we need to go to them in order for us to prioritize their voices in the planning process. Second is full circle communication. We believe in keeping residents informed at every step of the planning process because it's not just about taking input once and then kind of disappearing, but it's about having that continuous circle of communication with residents that makes the space comfortable enough for them to share their feedback and to kind of give us checks and balances on how we are going about with the process. So this includes sharing updates on how their feedback is shaping decisions and following up on outcomes once the projects are implemented. Third is the process needs to be accessible and transparent. We always aim to make all our materials, meetings, and processes easy to understand. Try to use plain language as much as possible, avoid jargon, and ensuring that people of different abilities and language backgrounds are fully able to participate. So, for example, one way that we do this is we work with a lot of immigrant communities and communities whose first language is not English. In those cases, we tend to constantly translate all our materials for outreach, but also our final plan, or at least parts of our final plan, are translated in different languages in a way that they can be distributed in the community and they can go back to the city hall with their feedback. Finally, our process aims to be dynamic and iterative. So engagement isn't a one-time event, it is an ongoing conversation. And we try to adapt our strategies based on what we learn from residents and the community by continuously improving the process as we go. So these principles are kind of like the foundation for everything we do and help ensure that our planning process truly reflects the voices and experiences of the community. Next slide, please. Cool. So here I'll walk you all through the different phases of developing the plan itself. First is our first phase is existing conditions analysis. In this phase, we take a closer look at what already exists in the community. We examine current programs, policies, infrastructure, and review any available data on internet access, device availability, and digital literacy, which is the three legs of the stool for digital equity framework. This helps us identify the gaps that are in the community, what is the work that's already happening so that we are not reinventing the wheel and we are building on efforts that are already happening in the city, understand what are the trends and get a baseline picture of digital equity in a community. Second is where we do community engagement. So it's called our outreach and qualitative data research phase, because quantitative data alone tells only part of the story. And in this phase, we engage directly with community organizations and residents who are most affected by digital inequities. We all know that digital divide does not impact everyone equally. There are some folks who are more impacted by lack of access to internet, not having enough training or skills, not having the appropriate devices. And we lead with wanting to prioritize those population groups within our planning process. So we use workshops, use focus group discussions and interviews to hear their experiences, challenges, and ideas directly. And this input helps us ensure that the plan reflects the needs and priorities of these individuals and families beyond just what the numbers suggest. And it's also about listening and understanding deeply about the lived experiences behind the numbers, because it's only when we talk to people, we try to get more insights into what could be like a behavioral issue that might be the barrier to digital access, or what could be the root cause behind more larger trends that we're seeing. Our third phase is synthesis and action plan development. So once we have collected both quantitative and qualitative insights, we reflect on what we've already learned to identify key themes, what are the key challenges and opportunities that come up during the process. And this is where we really start shaping concrete strategies, figuring out what approaches are likely to be effective, how can they be tailored to community context, where will a municipality need to make trade-offs in terms of investments, because everyone's limited in time, capacity, funding. And so we've seen an example where a municipality saw a need for both public Wi-Fi and digital literacy programs to support older residents and non-English speakers. And we had like multiple rounds of discussion on how can we prioritize or how can we distribute the implementation dollars in a way that reaches both these goals at once. Finally, our last phase is plan writing and documentation. In this phase, we put it all together, we develop a detailed action plan that includes short-term and long-term interventions, recommended strategies, and also like potential funding sources that the municipality can go after. The goal is to produce a plan that not only outlines priorities, but also provides practical guidelines for implementation. So municipalities and partners can then take meaningful steps towards advancing digital inclusion as even after the plan has ended. Next slide, please. So here I want to share some examples of community engagement methods that we've used during the existing conditions and community needs assessment phase. So the first picture here is an example of our charrette style workshops. This is where we bring multiple stakeholders together in the same room. For example, in this picture, this was a charrette workshop with the town of Chelmsford in Massachusetts, where we brought residents, municipal staff, community-based organizations together in the same room to co-develop solutions. And the focus here is to sometimes react together to what the numbers tell about a community, but the primary focus is specifically to shape ideas coming together from group discussions. For example, in this particular example, that the table that I was facilitating had the library director at our table, and in during our discussions, we came up with a solution to invest in more privacy pods or like tech pods within the library so that people and library sees a lot of people coming and sees a lot of demand. So when people do come, they have a safe and secure space to undertake more private and sensitive matters online. The second method we've often used are focus group discussions. These, I'm sure a lot of people might be familiar. These are smaller, more intimate sessions to create space for deeper listening with the residents itself. So we encourage residents to share their concerns, their barriers, and even aspirations that might not come up in larger public meetings. So here in the second picture is an example of a game board activity that we used for a focus group discussion, which was which was a situation where we encouraged participants to prioritize the trade-offs that when they were thinking about different solutions and visualize the different choices that play out. And it's a way to make abstract policy decisions or more abstract programmatic ideas that someone might have into more tangible and understandable format without individuals having to be put on spot while sharing their ideas. And finally is the share out of recommendations that we do pretty regularly. In these sessions, the idea is to close the loop by showing participants how their input has influenced proposals or trying to get to next steps in the implementation process. It essentially reinforces that community feedback truly shapes the planning process. So the third photo here is an example of a share out process where we went back to the community with our findings from our first two phase, and then we told them that these are some of the recommendation ideas that have come up in their discussions and some of the recommendation ideas that we as planners would like to also include in the planning document or in the final recommendations. And it was during the recommendations phase that they prioritized which recommendation to go forward with, which can be slightly deprioritized and can be a more like long-term goal that they can get back to later. Next slide, please. So in the next two slides, I have a couple of examples that I wanted to share with all of you so that you all get a sense of how we actually completed the process for the towns that we worked with. And here is an example from City of Gloucester, which is is a coastal town in the North Shore region of Massachusetts, or in the North Shore region of the Boston area. And here, if you look at the two maps, we mapped the smartphone-only households, a percentage of households who are dependent on smartphones on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side is percentage distribution, like a geographic distribution of percentage of people of color within the city of Gloucester. So when you look at the two maps together, we realized that there is a clear concentration of need that was emerged in the downtown area of Gloucester, which is the darkest color in the right-hand side map. And this data revealed or like helped the city of Gloucester to prioritize downtown as a site for piloting a public Wi-Fi in their implementation proposal, because they realized that data plans can be very expensive, and there was a lot of affordability issues, and there were so many people who were dependent on smartphones, and they wanted to try out this idea of implementing a public space Wi-Fi in the downtown area so that at least when they are in these public spaces, they don't have to depend on their smartphones for their use. But it was through interviews and other forms of engagement, we learned something that data alone could not show, which is that a local organization, like local community organization, shared with us that they had already built strong networks of service providers, and they had done a lot of pre-work in building partnerships with each other, and yet they were still facing persistent language and cultural barriers when talking to residents. So this insight helped us shift the conversation from simply providing connectivity to also focusing on more language accessibility and inclusion so that the benefits of a public space Wi-Fi could reach everyone in the community. For example, here I have a quote from a resident here who said that they would like to go to the library because library is where everyone went for all their like digital inclusion needs. They go to the library for their internet access if they wanted to access computers. So they said that they would like to go to the library, but they're shy and their English is limited, so they don't go. And this kind of helped us also really drive the go really deep into the evidence that there is a cultural and language issue that the city of Gloucester was facing, and they wanted to put in their investments or interventions focusing on bridging that gap as well as bridging the broadband access gap within the community. Next slide, please. So here is another example from the city of Beverly, which is also a coastal town in the North Shore region of Boston. And the city here knew from the data and from the start that they wanted to prioritize older residents and prioritize residents who identify with living with one or more disabilities. So Beverly has 18.6% of its residents who were 65 years or older, and 11.2% of their residents were individuals who identified with one or more disabilities. And the city of Beverly really wanted to make sure that these groups' needs were prioritized during the entire planning process, but also that they had targeted investments and recommendations for them. So it was during one of our workshops, which we held at the Council of Aging, because we heard that a lot of older residents like to come to the Council on Aging for a lot of workshop events, a lot of social gathering events, and just to be with their friends. So it was during that workshop, the participants shared solutions directly with us. And this input added a lot of nuance to our recommendations and also ensured that the solutions that we proposed were more tailored and targeted to the specific needs of the residents that we wanted to prioritize here. And we learned that while there was a huge need for digital skills or digital upskilling from the city for the older residents, but it was when we heard directly from the residents that we learned that digital skills need varied widely within the group. And they also expressed a desire for more versatile and personalized options for support, whether it was more one-on-one support, one-on-one assistance, or it was more peer learning or more self-guided education, whether through like how-to videos or educational materials. So these ideas, these insights helped us develop our recommendations or strategies in a more detailed way so that it helped the city of Beverly to apply for grants, apply for other sources of funding, or ask for more support from the mayor to design a program that would give them training opportunities. And these insights at the end of the day helped us shape the, the process and the final recommendations to be more responsive to community and resident stories. Next slide, please. So in the last two slides, as I will be wrapping up this presentation, I wanted to share some key themes and examples of strategies that we have seen emerge from our work with the few digital equity plans that we have developed with cities and towns in the Boston region. So first key theme that we have heard time and again is the need for coalitions and partnerships, because digital equity work is new for some towns and cities, but for others, it's something that people have been seeing the need for, have been tackling the issues with digital divide for a long time in very implicit ways. And this finding or this recommendation comes with the goal of wanting to convene a lot of people who are working together to get that kind of buy-in, get the support from each other in going after funding grants, going after building a coalition sort of efforts for their community. So many cities are finding value in convening a digital equity advisory group to help coordinate efforts. They collaborate with community anchor institutions or CAIs to expand services. And largely, we also help form regional partnerships that can help improve infrastructure across municipalities. So one of the biggest issues for the towns and cities in Massachusetts, at least, is the lack of ISP choices, which drives up the prices for residents to access the internet. So these regional partnerships for improving infrastructure is a way to have more shared community services or shared municipal services so that people can kind of dip into different funding sources or layer their funding sources, and the infrastructure can be built by the city or managed by the city for a region instead of doing it piecemeal for each municipality. The second key theme is the idea of broadband access. So one of the central core principle of digital equity framework. So cities are looking to, like I mentioned, ISP choice, lack of ISP choices is a big concern. So cities are looking to promote competition among internet service providers. And people, like cities and towns, have used different methods. Some have been proactive in wanting to facilitate dialogue with ISPs so that they can talk to other options, they can try to get them into their locality, into their neighborhood. Some municipalities have wanted to invest or like expand their own fiber infrastructure to increase broadband access to targeted communities. So that is another example where we provide guide. If a city is thinking about improving their, like expanding their own infrastructure, we provide guidance for planning and implementing public space Wi-Fi options. At MAPC, we also do a program called the Apartment Wi-Fi Program, which is we do the delivery of internet connection at unit level for public housing sites or affordable housing sites with in the Boston area. So we recognize that low income like residents who are low income are one of our biggest priorities. They are the ones who experience the biggest issues with internet affordability. And we see a lot of demographic intersections show up in public housing sites. And that's why the Apartment Wi-Fi program targets these public housing sites to either retrofit or improve their infrastructure to better have access to internet services at the unit level, and so that they don't have to go to like a private ISP and pay about $150 or $200 for their internet service, something that should be included in their utilities. So that is an example of how digital equity, like working on digital equity, has helped us rethink how we define affordable housing and how we define fair housing in many ways. Another key theme is device access. So here we recommend municipalities to organize device donation drives with corporations or with other community anchor institutions or community-based organizations to collect gently used devices. We have also recommended creation of tech refurbishment centers. And lastly, we also actively support municipalities in offering multilingual technology instruction coupled with individualized device access for priority population groups. Like I mentioned before, non-English speakers are a huge priority population group for the communities that we work with, and sometimes their digital access issues is not as siloed as digital literacy and devices. So we try to combine programs so that when they are we try to combine programmatic recommendations so that when they go for training, they come back, they walk away from the training with the devices so that they can keep learning and evolving themselves. Next slide, please. So here are a few more recommendation themes, and this will be my last slide, where the first thing that I would talk about here is digital literacy. So this includes developing multilingual educational materials that we have recommended to municipalities, whether it's on technology basics or on more advanced technology training. We have also seen a lot of interest for Train the Trainer program because a lot of frontline staff who are fighting the digital divide are at capacity, they have limited time, they have limited resources. So how can their teaching be modeled off and help other people? Like how can a cohort be developed for more teachers to come out of a program? Second, Another common theme that we have seen among municipalities is also repositioning community TV or like public access TVs as a digital resource hub. This has been an interesting recommendation that has come up in a few municipalities where public access TVs are um, running out of funding as people shift towards more streaming services and they're not using cable TV as much. But at the end of the day, these community or public access TVs are the ones that are making civic engagement open for a lot of people. So how can we reposition them as a community asset and help them develop a digital resource hub for the communities that they serve has been an interesting learning for us, but also an exciting option that a lot of communities have wanted to go for. Then we have also seen our recommendations come up for more outreach and awareness. This comes from the idea that a lot of municipalities, a lot of community organizations are already doing this work, and the outreach and awareness is to elevate the work that has already been happening within a community. So cities are interested in creating directories of digital equity resources and integrating assessments of digital literacy and device access needs into their one-on-one client services at agencies. Um, and sometimes we've also heard about, so in our planning process, we also do something called community asset mapping in one of our existing conditions phases. And a lot of the times the digital equity resources or the directory of resources that we develop directly comes out of the community asset mapping. So it's not something that the municipality has to do from scratch. It is something that the planning process sets the stage for, and they can just take it from there. And lastly, a key theme that we hear time and again and pretty loudly from all municipalities is the need for more funding support, more capacity support for municipalities to continue doing this work. So this involves providing guidelines, resources, program support, and funding for existing and new digital navigation programs. We've also seen interest from municipalities for wanting to have a dedicated digital equity officer so that all the programs are streamlined through them. They have so that not all departments are tackling different areas of digital equity, but there is more coordinated effort into how a city hall tackles the issues that they're seeing in their community, and also offering more funding and technical support to community-based organizations and anchor institutions to expand their capacity to continue doing the work that they're already doing. So these recommendations are examples of some strategies that cities have developed in collaborations with residents and the community organizations that they constantly work with. And each city's approach is unique, but the common thread is truly to center the community needs and ensure that digital equity is accessible, inclusive, and most importantly, actionable. So with that, I will conclude my presentation and thank everyone for their time. And I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. That was really, really fascinating to hear your experience. I believe I haven't received any questions in the chat, and it looks like we haven't gotten any questions. But we're actually right on schedule to move on to our raffle giveaway, which is actually very closely related to a lot of the things you were talking about in your presentation. Here is Annika's contact information if anyone would like to reach out to her afterwards. Session, the next and final session of the day, is Are You Speaking My Language? Cultural Responsiveness in Adult Education. This is a topic that's really near and dear to our heart at Digital Lift. We have contractors that teach in several languages, and I think this is a really important piece of the conversation. And as we heard in the presentation, especially if you're working in communities that are diverse, that have a lot of folks speaking other languages or with limited English proficiency, it's really important to consider how digital literacy efforts might show up differently for those communities. So we hope you'll join us for that session. And our giveaway is our online course, Assessing Community Needs. So this covers all the things like examining your community, whatever its scope, to see what the current challenges and needs are related to digital inclusion, and also mapping community assets. So what resources, what programs exist in the community? What are the places that are working on this, so that you can kind of put together a map to help you strategize and develop a plan for improving digital inclusion. So our winners for this course are Katie Hopkins, Rick Cantora, Osod Munoz. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. So congratulations to you three. We'll follow up next week with access to your course. And you can always reach out if you have any feedback, questions. You can reach us at lift@digitallift.org. So thank you again so much, Annika, for joining us, for sharing your wisdom. And we hope to see the rest of you in about 9 minutes in our last session. So everyone have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining us.